You're tuned in to the AMP'D UP211 Podcast, the show where amputees, survivors, and warriors share their real stories behind the scars. This is where resilience meets rebellion, and where we turn pain into power. Today's guest is Katy Grainger, sepsis survivor, double amputee, and a fearless advocate shaking up the healthcare system. One cut, one infection, one near-death experience changed everything. But Katy didn't stop at surviving. She's using her voice to save lives, shift policy, and remind the world that limb loss isn't the end of the story. It's just the start of a different kind of strength. If you think you've heard it all, get ready. Katy Grainger is here, and the episode is about to get amped up. Hey everyone, this is Rick Bontkowski from the AMP'D UP211 Podcast, and we have the pleasure of having Katy Grainger here today, sepsis survivor, and I'm the board of directors from the Sepsis Alliance. This is a big day for us here, and I don't know a whole lot about sepsis, but what I will say before I let you charge, man, it's terrifying. It's one of those things as an amputee we look at and say, oh boy, that wasn't as bad for me, because this seems like, I guess I'd compare it to the most catastrophic thing that can happen, like in your body happens.
In your body.
Yeah. What happens when you go into septic shock, which is this complete, just full-on, full guns assault of your organs and your tissues. And it's, and I will say this before we get into the actual interview. Anyone that follows Katy, she's been, incredibly transparent about all of the events, leading up to what we're going to talk about also today, her amputations, her life after, becoming an amputee. But in terms of documenting what occurred, the steps in which led you to that, you've done just a fantastic job of
Thank you.
Building that narrative and saying, hey, this is how it started. This is how it progressed. This is how it escalated. Here were the challenges that I faced. And all of that detail is incredibly important, because so often, and you're an advocate in this space now, people may not know what's happening, because it would appear to me that a lot of these warning signs can give mixed messages. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that we think, I'm just not feeling very well, can be warning signs for very, very serious outcomes. And, your story is just, I mean, it's really incredibly engaging to listen to you describe all of those events that occurred, starting with, as you described, well, I had this kind of weird, this weird bump on my thumb, and there's kind of like some clear fluid coming out, and it kind of looks infected, but what is that? And then boom, 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 house of cards, everything just caved in on you. And here you are today, which is a wonderful thing. You're here, you're alive, and you've lived to tell. So I think where I'd like you to start is explain to the audience what sepsis is, and sort of what that spectrum of symptoms might look like, and also how to take action in these situations. So I'm going to give it over to you.
All right. Thank you. First of all, thank you for that introduction. Wow. I appreciate that you truly do, see my message and understand why I'm here and what I'm doing. Let's begin, first of all, what sepsis is. Sepsis is your body's overwhelming response to an infection. And I've been working on my book. So I'm just going to say that I've been trying to explain a lot of these things in writing, like the story of what happened to me and having it be information, the same as I do on my TikTok and all my social media, of trying to share like how I missed the symptoms and how you could maybe learn from my experience and notice these subtle changes. Sepsis can look like the flu. It can look like a urinary tract infection or pneumonia or strep throat. That's often where it begins because those are all infections. And so those infections, if your body gets triggered, and it can happen, and it happens in, 20% of the world's population dies from sepsis. Now, in fairness, it's not that 20% of the people are going to get sepsis or die from it. It's that it's a natural way that when you are very ill or when you are weak, it is a natural way that oftentimes is the final thing that will happen that will take someone out. But when we're younger and healthier, we have to worry about it both sides. We have to worry about it for elderly people or sick people. Like you said, amputees, you look around the room and you say, wow, that person lost 4 limbs. I maybe only lost 1. And for me, I'm really lucky. I have my hands, and that's a miracle. And I'll tell a little bit about that. But I do not have my lower legs. And to be a double lower leg amputee is really pretty overwhelming on its own. But I have a lot of friends that have no hands, and I'm sure you do as well, that, you've seen. And most or many quad amputees are from sepsis. So it's an overwhelming response of your immune system that attacks this virus or this fungus even, or a bacterial infection. And it basically goes haywire. And I think you described it as like, it's like a war that goes on inside your body, or it's like a house on fire, or it just goes ballistic, and it starts not being specific about what it's shooting at. So your immune system, instead of just targeting a bacteria, it starts attacking itself. It starts attacking your cell walls and inside of your, blood system. And in my case, I had a condition called DIC, which can happen in, I think it's about 20% of septic shock patients, which are the very sickest of the sepsis patients. And it causes your blood vessels to get holes in them. And then you begin seeping blood in your extremities, in my case, my fingertips and my feet. And your body goes out to block all of the bleeding that you have internally. And then you run out of platelets. And if you're not in a hospital setting, you will die from this. This infection will get out of control, and you will lose limbs, and you may not survive. I was fortunate on one hand. I waited far too long, which is what my story is about. However, I did get to the hospital really just in the nick of time, because I really, really barely survived. But when my life was saved, when they brought my organs back, because they did all fail, when they brought my organs back, they were able to get some circulation back in my hands. And honestly, with how long I waited, not my fault. I just didn't know what was happening. And it wasn't obvious until it was very obvious. And when it was very obvious, my hands and feet were starting to hurt. And I was like, something's really wrong. I don't just have the flu, which is what I thought I had, but I'm like, wow, my hands are burning and my toes are burning. And that was already the DIC beginning. But they were able to get some circulation through treatments at the very end, after my life was saved, back into my hands, and I did get them back. So anyways, a huge blessing. I'm grateful for them. Like you, I meet a lot of amputees, and you realize upper limbs are really difficult. Lower limbs are difficult too, because we walk on them. So there's not one that's, really easier than the other, but it's a lot of adjustments, learning how to operate in the world and have a mechanism besides your hands doing it for you. So I have a huge amount of gratitude for that. I'm able to do a lot of things I couldn't do, or I wouldn't be able to do, or wouldn't be able to do easily if I didn't have fingers. So I'm really grateful for that.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
As far as origins, I think that the curiosity I have is there a specific strain of bacteria? Is there a specific cause? Is any of this related to, something that they find, that they're able to test for, that they say, okay, this is what's inside your body? And moreover, could it have anything to do with things like geography, like where you live, or the environments in which you are exposed to. So I always go to that, okay, and not that I'm into the blame game. It's more of, how does this little wildfire start? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
is, and there may be a spectrum of various ways that it comes
Yeah.
about, but given that you're very much in this space, especially in the advocacy piece,
Mm-hmm.
help us understand a little bit better the origin story of like how people end up, with sepsis.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, it can happen to anybody from any infection. So that makes it, and that's kind of a broad answer because it really says anything can cause it. And that's part of my story, is that even something small can cause it. And that's the thing. That's why I always say, it started with this little bump on my thumb, but that bump ended up being a resistant staph infection. And so what happened with me, just briefly, is that I'd been living in Honolulu at the time in Hawaii. We had a flood 6 months prior. So a flooding condition is something, anytime there's a natural disaster, floods, fires, those types of things where the environment gets messed up and there's toxins in the air, people are going to have more infections. Sepsis rates are going to go up. So, I was in a situation where I was, in that case, more likely to get it. I was also in the tropics, and maybe there's more stuff growing in the tropics. One thing I will say is there's not a ton of research on like some of the subtleties of it, like specific locations and things like that. It doesn't just happen in third world countries. It happens to, healthy, clean, people all the time.
Yeah.
It is your body's response. So some of us seem to be maybe more prone to it, or just the right perfect storm happens within your body that causes it. And again, we don't have the subtle research to know exactly why and what the reason that the sepsis happens. However, we do know that it's always an infection. And when we're in locations or situations where we don't have, proper antibiotics for one thing, or just antimicrobials, like where you're not, camping and hiking and out in the woods or in a third world country, you want to be more safe. And sepsis control, infection control is sepsis control. So if you can stop infections from happening, you can stop sepsis from happening. So you want to be careful about getting colds. And, when you're on airplanes, if you believe in it, and I do believe in it based on all my research that I've done in this field, throw on a mask, especially if you hear someone coughing next to you. Maybe you have it in your bag and just pull it out or whatever. Do the things that you can. Wash your hands frequently. Do the things that you can to avoid infection and avoid the spread of infection. Use antibiotics appropriately. One thing that I thought you might have been leading to in that was, is it a antibiotic resistance situation? And in my case, it was. I had started antibiotics. I saw this infection. I went to a little clinic by my home. I got a antibiotic ointment to put on it. And they said, yeah, it looks like it might be a staph infection. And then we always worry about a resistant staph. So they gave me a prescription, which would be good for resistant staph, but it wasn't strong enough. And because it was a Friday, they gave me an antibiotic that I could begin taking, without getting test results back. Because when you test a bacteria, it can take days to get results back. So without getting results back, they gave me an antibiotic and said, try this. If it doesn't work rapidly, like if the next day you're not finding some relief, you should go into probably the emergency room, because it was a weekend. And I ended up in the emergency room on Sunday, barely alive. And I didn't call for help. I threw up over the weekend, but I thought it was because I took an antibiotic. I was really tired, but I thought it was because I was traveling. I never had a fever. This is something I really like to stress. Usually you will have a fever when your body is going into this type of situation. However, with sepsis, sometimes it takes all of the resources just to attack your body. So it doesn't even bother giving you the fever that would fight it. That's one of the systems that kind of fails. And so you can end up with either a low temperature or no fever at all, like I had. And so I always encourage people, if you think you're sick, even if you don't have a fever, keep looking for symptoms. So anyways, it's just any bacteria anywhere in the world, anytime, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because so much of what you're describing, the majority of anyway, is kind of everyday, I don't feel well kind of stuff. And this is a lesson in always be cautious, always develop suspicion when you're not feeling well, and it could save your life and, possibly your limbs. But,
Absolutely.
if we want to call it that, the happy part of your story is that you obviously have friends, family, people that rushed to your aid, got you to, whatever facility necessary to evaluate the fact that you needed to go to a major hospital, okay, that was, had a trauma center and gave you a fighting chance at life. And you've described it well. I've, of course, have followed your content and was riveted by, your story and sort of the stages of what you went through. And then, realizing, that your husband was on a fishing trip and, we've got to get him back here, and, getting your kids corralled and getting them to your bedside, and doctors saying, hey, you need to be surrounded by your family right now, because I think the way you described it, which really kind of floored me, was you're the sickest person in this hospital right now. We are really worried about your outcomes, and we need to get your family here and make sure that if things do truly end up being, terminal, that you at least have a chance for your family to see you.
And that was said to my husband, because at that point I was already in a coma. It was a drug-induced coma to give me the strength to travel from Kauai over to Oahu, which is Honolulu, where the level 1 trauma center was. And the level 1 trauma centers, around the country are the ones that are equipped to handle with people as sick as I was in their ICUs.
Yeah. And I was very impressed with something that you had said. It really inspired me. There was a moment where a dog came to visit your family, and obviously everyone's huddled around you. It's a very serious tone, and everyone is sort of dealing with the weight of what was happening to you. And this dog comes, and there's this photo that I saw that you put into this video of your kids were smiling, and this dog was there. And I think what struck me, really struck me and resonated, was how happy that moment made you, that you were the one that was in crisis. You were the one that needed, really in truth, all attention put on you. But it made you so happy that your family had a moment of just happiness, of just a little bit of joy.
Absolutely.
Mixed in to this like cataclysmic event that was like swirling around everyone. And I thought to myself, well, what does that say about her? That was important to her. It was important that during that struggle, during that very dark moment, that her family could smile, even if it was just for 10 minutes. That they could smile and know that life is still worth living. So I think that's a tribute to your selflessness and who you are, probably as as a spouse and as a mother and all those other things.
Thank you.
Because let's face it, I mean, when these things happen to us, it sometimes it's hard to get out of that box, which is the me box of, hey, I kind of need help here. I'm missing some parts, and and I think there was another thing that you had mentioned about traveling, shortly thereafter, and you had someone that was willing to, kind of man your wheelchair and kind of get you around. And here's the thing that I tell people: please do not stop living your life.
Absolutely.
There is so much out there still available to you. And I know it's different. I know it's hard. It's a struggle. It sucks sometimes to get on a plane, to wait for your baggage, to get in and out of your transportation and all of those things. But it's those moments that are going to make it feel normal, worth it, where you say, okay, yeah, I've got all this other stuff, but I'm still living my life. I'm still here. My family's around me. That didn't change. Okay.
Yeah.
So I admire that, but it's something I think we have to sort of project and say, you got to go for it sometimes. Just do it. Just go and do it. I know you're scared. I know you're worried about the unknowns. I mean, I go through the TSA checkpoints and
Oh, I was going to say, I'm like, you forgot TSA. That's the worst part of the whole travel. But they're so nice. They're all so nice now.
They are.
I mean, it's just like, but it's just, you just know that you're just like, here, I'm going to have to go.
But it's a major shit show. I mean, there are times you go through and it's like, oh my gosh, like.
Or if you've been in a long line and, I'm not in a wheelchair, you're not in a wheelchair and your leg's sore and you just, you want to like say, can I be handicapped right now? I really don't want, I mean, like I'm dying here.
But I've had, there isn't a time, very rare, and I do a fair amount of travel, where you don't become like the spotlight goes on and you're the person that has to go through the special check and the gunpowder check and the special scan and, all the stuff.
All of
it. And I've learned to just grin and bear it. But I will say there are times where I say, okay, well, this is the cost of me living my life. And you need to be grateful that you have the privilege of traveling. And it is a privilege. And you have to be healthy about it, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's stressful. Well, you mentioned earlier, the experience with the dog in the hospital. And one of the things that occurred to me when you started talking about travel is that one of the things I like to remind people too, is that don't judge your life. I mean, you can't help it. When you're in the worst moment of your life, you are in the worst moment of your life and you're going to have to get through it. But, a dog coming in jolts you out of that. This golden retriever. I mean, it's the joke about like golden retrievers are like, they're just like the epitome of, they're like little teddy bears. They're epitome of happiness and joy and, just nothing's important except just being a golden retriever, and so, this dog rolls in and it just stops time. And you have a minute to say, oh my gosh, we love dogs. We're a family that loves dogs. And this animal just loves me and doesn't look at me and say, you don't have hands and feet, or your hands judgment. And feet are black, or, or you're really sick. And, and it allows everyone to just have a moment to get out of it. But in that moment, I just want people to remind themselves, that when you're going through the worst thing, you just got to hang on to some hope. If you can find just the littlest thread of hope and hold on to it, and just know that it's going to take time, be it through grief or through pain or through, any type of hardship. It just is going to take some time. And we have models all around us of people who've gotten through it. You mentioned that, it's tough to see quadruple amputees in wheelchairs with missing arms. It's heartbreaking. And you look at it and you say, wow, what is this sepsis? It's really scary. But, I look around the room also and I see these people and I'm like, there's someone who was in an electrical accident or a motorcycle accident, or who had, a bone that wouldn't heal properly and they had to make the conscious decision to remove a limb. I mean, there are so many situations that we go through. And I mean, on some level, none of them are worse than others. It's like whatever it is for us, it's the hardest thing that we've been through. And we can always look around and find someone who's been through something harder. And I just encourage people to just realize that, look around you day to day and realize the resilience of the world. And we get a chance to see that. I'm sure you get it. I get it a lot because I have, especially with two legs, and I wear shorts all the time. And so people can see my legs, just kind of people saying, wow, good for you, and some people find that that's a little bit insulting, and I understand that. But I just choose to look at it as nothing but a positive, that I'm glad that I can have someone look at me and say, wow, she's been through a lot, and I'm proud that she's here, happy for her that she's here. And it inspires me in the moment. I can be that golden retriever to somebody a little bit, and not to minimize my disability in any way or belittle the community in any way, but just to acknowledge that, when people see someone else living their best life through hardship, it is very inspirational. So I just choose to be that inspiration. I know one of the things I was reading about you that you wrote in your article, and it was something that I had to learn about too. Remember when we weren't born disabled and we became disabled, we had to learn all this. Yeah. And I just bought a book that I'm trying to learn better, the lingo and the things to say that are appropriate and inappropriate, and how, I understand, the nuances. But toxic positivity is something that I learned about early on. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I toxically positive? Is my message all wrong? And I realized no, because I'm authentically positive. And I'm one of the faces of disability. I'm not the face. And no one should be. And that's what your podcast is about bringing on people. There are people who are struggling. There was, when I woke up in the hospital and I saw my black hands and I couldn't see my body and I didn't know what had happened, and they told me I was in a coma. I was hallucinating. I thought one of my children had died. It was the worst moment of my life, and I wanted to die. And I spent most of that first day, but then fortunately, because of the hallucination factor, I'd sometimes be in that hallucination, then I'd come back into reality, and then I'd go again. And so it sort of came and went with my, clarity. But it's very difficult. It's a difficult process. And it's been 8 years for me as an amputee. And I joined the board of directors of Sepsis Alliance very quickly, and that was a life raft for me. And not everyone gets something like that. And I totally understand that. I love sharing my story. I was in Bible studies before this, when my kids were younger, and groups where I led children and inspired them, and that was something I always enjoyed, and I always liked sharing my story to inspire others. So this was a natural for me to kind of move into speaking and sharing and encouraging others. But, again, this is stuff that I read about you, and I love this podcast. That's not everybody's story, and it doesn't have to be. And the thing that's really amazing to me is that at 52 years old, I became an amputee. And I was at a place where my kids were gone from home. I'd been a stay-at-home mom. I was coming back into my marriage and kind of looking across at my high school sweetheart and going, I love you so much. But we're both doing different things. Like, are we still having fun? Like, what are we supposed to do with all this time we have? I was really looking for a purpose, and I sort of thought my purposes were behind me. And I just sort of thought, well, maybe one day my kids will have kids and I can be a grandma. And I am, by the way, and it is the greatest thing ever. And I'm definitely going to immerse myself very heavily in that.
I'm a grandpa as well.
Oh, it's the best. It's so great.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
And it gives me this other purpose. But in that time between, wishing my kids would have babies so I didn't have to think about what I was going to do with my life, this crazy, horrible, messed up thing happened to me. And then it ended up being something that I grew through it more than I ever thought I could. My marriage grew through it more than I ever thought it could. And we grow when we overcome things. And
we're very, you and I, we're very much in alignment in that regard. And what I mean by that is, I think before I had gotten sick, I was sick for about 4 years. And before that, I was very much in a similar place. I, unfortunately, in a very, very toxic relationship, but had reached a point in my life where I was sort of questioning, okay, is this kind of it? And is something going to change? Is this sort of like riding off into the sunset? Mm-hmm. Like it's just there's no more challenges. There's no more engagement. There's no more wild curiosity. Okay. And after, going through that, and now I'm almost 10 years healthy and well. My life since that moment has been a complete transformation. Transformation.
Yeah.
And this is a common theme, that this type of trauma, struggle, life-changing event that completely sets you into recalibration mode, all of a sudden, all of these things come to you and you think, oh my gosh, like I can be creative again. I can pursue advocacy. I can be a light in this community. I can go on a podcast. I can share my thoughts and my experience through authoring a book. I can do all of these things. It's almost as if the worst thing that happened in my life became the best thing for me to make changes, positive changes. And I became this completely different version of myself. And I am so fascinated with people like you. And because you follow the show, you know that there's this massive spectrum of people that end up in this situation, which is, okay, now I have to figure out how to adapt. Now I have to figure out what transformation is really about. Because as long as, you're healthy and well and life just kind of becomes status quo, those ideas, those challenges, those mental, physical, spiritual challenges, they never arrive because you're just cruising along.
Yeah. You're
Everything's
happy with
fine.
what you have. So you're not seeking. You're just going along the path. And I look at it and kind of laugh that it's like, wow, did I really need to get knocked that far off my path to get back onto a path? But I mean, maybe in some ways, I don't believe that there's only one route. I believe there are many routes, and this is the route that happened to me. But when I got thrown off that path, I wanted back on. And you mentioned, back to the dog and back to my children and my family. My children and my family have always, and my husband and this world that we've created, that's always been my beacon. And so I remember when this happened, just thinking, I can't live like this. And then realizing, of course you have it was a couple days of just these thoughts going through my head, and then realizing I can live. I see these people surrounding me. They want me to live. They see me the same. I look at myself and I see that I'm damaged and broken and these things that aren't things I don't feel anymore. But in that moment, again, judging my life at its worst moment, it was shattered. It was ruined. It was unsalvageable. And none of that was true. And I could see that in the eyes of my family. And I could see that in the laughter sitting with the dog and just thinking I could have moments like that. Even that moment right there, I'm having it right now. I can look at them and their happiness and from a hospital bed with purple hands and feet, and say, I could, even if this was as far as it went, I could enjoy my life. And I could see how that is possible. And that's sometimes what we have to do is just grab onto that little life draft that's in front of us. And we keep raising the stakes. And, again, back to just like the variety of ways that people handle it. You and I've handled it positively. You were kind of pushed into getting this podcast going. And it's just, we end up taking these, if you leave your mind open and look at what's possible instead of what's limiting you. And of course you begin in the place where all you can see is what you're losing. But once you start opening yourself up and start looking more toward the positive and stop focusing on the negative, because when you focus on the negative, that's what you're going to draw in. And if you can accept the negative, or you can acknowledge it and have your moments where you get mad, in the morning when you get up and you have to put on legs, in the middle of the night when you have to go to the bathroom and you have to put on your legs, and then you wake up your partner and then you just feel bad and you get back in bed and you feel a little crabby, and then you get up the next day and you got to put them on again. And then you just say, okay, great. I had my moments. That wasn't fun. I didn't like it. It was a bad way to start the day. Wish I didn't have to do it, but I do. Go brush your teeth and get on with it,
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about body image because someone, like yourself, I think for some amputees, not all, I think men tend to sort of press into that, kind of badass, like, okay, I'm just going to be I'm just going to be in the gym and I'm just going to build my body elsewhere. And yeah, I'm going to have this thing, but it's going to be it's going to be kind of like like my badge of, courage and grit and all that stuff. And I think for women, it takes on a different sort of dimension because
I think you're right.
Our culture is not as receiving in terms of the idea of a female and carbon fiber and all of those things sometimes don't mix well. So you mentioned your family, kind of seeing yourself through the eyes of your family. And I'm not suggesting that I didn't go through, some serious
of course, everyone
dysmorphic issues
body.
of looking at myself and saying, "Oh my gosh, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad." But what bridges do you feel like you had to build to get to the place you are now, which you project a lot of power, a lot of confidence, you're highly articulate, obviously educated, and you very much have pressed into your situation to say, I'm me. All of this other stuff doesn't necessarily define me. I am who I am. I am this force. I am this energy. And the other stuff is just kind of like accessories, I guess. But how did you feel like you made that sort of transformation to be the version of yourself now?
That's such a good question. It's funny. I mentioned my book and I'm working on writing it, and it's mostly written, but there's some things that I haven't written. And one of the ones I haven't written is what I'm about to talk about. And it was one of my lowest points. It was, I had gotten my legs. It was about 3 months out from having sepsis. I got my new legs finally, and I really felt disconnected from the world. And so literally to put my feet on the ground was just incredible. And even like I just did that and I just felt empowered just doing, stomping on the ground just now. It just felt so powerful that it's like, okay, I get this image out of my head that I'm no longer connected to the world. I have something that connects me, and I'm, I'm back, and I literally could stand up and I was able to walk and I was getting going. And then two things happened to me. I got the flu. I got really, really sick, and I ended up on the floor in my bathroom, it took me from like thinking I was all great and getting going, and then just feeling like I'd lost everything again. And just here I was on the floor, and I'm throwing up, and it just was awful. And I had to take my legs off because I couldn't sleep with them on, and I was sleeping by the toilet, and it was horrible. And then a couple weeks later, I finally had to admit that my hair had been falling out the whole time, and I was losing it. And I had to cut my hair really super short. So I got sort of a prelude to the whole body image thing, the lack of control, and then this body image thing that was thrown at me right when I thought I was back on my feet, literally and figuratively. And so it sort of gave me a chance when I was in a better place to grapple with just what, dealing with hardship. Because the first time around, I did it with a lot of denial, and that's great. I mean, it's a beautiful technique, and it's your body protects you from the really hard things, which is amazing. And it's how people get through the hardest things. It's how they lose people they love. And, it's like there's a period there that you do protect yourself. And I'm really appreciative of that. But the denial had been peeled away at this point. And here I was losing my hair, and I am a force, I am energy, I am all these things, but I also was packaged in a body that I liked, and that I had worked on, and that had been sort of, like that silly little thing is that I had really pretty feet. I had like these little size 7 feet, and people always complimented my feet, which is silly and very unimportant. And I can look back at it now and just go, who cares, But at the time I was just like, well, what am I now without these cute little feet, and I always had my nails painted, and I always wore slippers, little flip-flops, and that was just something that I was about me. I went and got pedicures every 10 days, and I'd lost that. So anyways, when my hair had to get cut short, it was just sort of a moment for me to step back and acknowledge that I am so much more than any of this. And all I have to do is look around me, and no one sees a difference. Not one person that knows me looks at me differently. They didn't look at me differently when I was on the couch and I had no legs. They didn't look at me differently when I was in a wheelchair. They didn't look at me differently when I was walking with a walker or a cane, they just looked at me and they saw me. And that was one of the kind of beautiful things that got to happen through the process, is realizing I just am so much more than this package. Now, that being said, I agree with you that it's harder for women. I think that prosthetics aren't as, there's a rugged way you can go. And I'm a petite woman. So I'm 5'2", and depending on what prosthetics I have on, but I was 5'2" before, and I'm very small. And so prosthetics really are big on me, and some of the things, like, for instance, the hand ones that I had, it was really hard to find anything to get on my hands that wasn't just gigantic. And I didn't feel like I was just like some mechanical, they were just so big and bulky, and it just didn't feel good. I didn't want to have these big hands on me.
But you've adapted as far as your hands. I mean,
I have, beautifully, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's funny because I think that kind of happened. It didn't happen on its own. I mean, I put a lot of thought. I look into it. I did a lot of occupational therapy, and I did a lot of things, rubbing and touching and feeling things to get the sensation right. But I did it in the background as I was really putting my brain energy into my legs, because in my mind, that was my biggest loss. Just because it was my way to get around the world. And they're also bigger. I mean, it's a big thing. And it's just, it's just in your everyday. So are my hands. So it's hard to explain, but they kind of were secondary for me.
I don't think, it's hard because I don't think we can really weigh and measure, and you're an experiment. You're a study in that idea, because someone will say to me, what would you have rather lost?
Oh, yeah.
Me personally, I always say my leg.
My leg.
Mm-hmm. I always say my leg, because... Go ahead. You were going to ask me a question.
Do you think it's because now that it wasn't that bad? I mean, you can look back and say, you know what? I can adapt. This is adaptable.
I feel like so much of my life is driven by my fine motor in my hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, I'm a professional person. I love to write. I'm a creative guy. Are
you a musician?
Yeah, I'm a drummer.
Drummer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I rely upon with my hands. Now,
mm-hmm.
was, adapting, being, missing, my leg. Yeah, it was hard. It was challenging. There were all the, roadblocks and trials that you have to go through to have what we call a normal day, where
mm-hmm.
we forget, at least for a few moments, that any of this even happened. And you go, wow, like, it was just kind of a normal day. Like, everything just felt normal. And I didn't feel like I had limitations, or I didn't feel like I was disabled for any reason. But you're an interesting person to talk to, because you're experiencing both at the same time. And I'm certainly curious and also fascinated by how you, given that you're missing essentially, fingers.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, exactly. That you've had to go through a major exercise in adaptation. So
mm-hmm.
whether that is preparing a meal, hunting and pecking on a keyboard, whether that's, whatever, riding a bike, whatever it is, you've
mm-hmm.
figured out a way.
Grip.
Yeah.
That was an issue. We just moved the brakes and put them up here so that I could reach them. And,
right.
It's amazing. We learn to adapt. I mean,
exactly.
So I think that's a lot of it is you figure it out.
But the walking part, I agree, when you're robbed of that ability to
mm-hmm.
stand up and to walk, that can seem pretty daunting if you don't
mm-hmm.
have the equipment to get there. Because certainly we can't walk on our residual limbs. I guess we could, but it would create a lot of problems, a lot of skin breakdown. I've seen lifers, amputees, born amputees
Yeah.
that can actually walk, on the residual limbs.
Wow. Yeah.
It's bizarre to me because I think, oh gosh, that looks so painful. And they're like, you don't understand. Like, I've never had any tissue there. So I'm literally just peg legging on my bone, and different experience. So of course, those episodes are always interesting as well, to talk to someone that it's always been this way. I didn't go through a change. This is just who I was from day one.
Yeah, right.
But I would think for you, and you can answer it better, there are probably certain days where it's like maybe you're sort of consumed with this issue, whereas there might be certain days where you're consumed with the legs.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and it just depends. When I'm watching a cute police procedural on TV that was filmed in Ireland, and I'm looking at the towns and thinking, oh, we should go on that hike that our friends did where they went from town to town. And then I realize it's like 14 miles between the towns, and I can't walk 14 miles anymore. And then I get sad, but then when I sit down and I realize I wrote 80% of my book or 70% of my book with these fingers. And it was so complicated, and none of the software works well. I'm a below the knee amputee, not a baloney amputee, which like BOLOGNA. And anyways, I just got so sick of all that it was hunted and pecked, and some was put in verbally, but then I have to go back and edit it. And I finally, got a ghostwriter to come in and help me just weave the story together, because I was like, I did it on a podcast when we were talking about being a finger amputee. And I realized I don't honor this enough. Like, this is hard, hard. And I just want to honor and accept and identify as a finger amputee. And there's things that suck about it. You're absolutely right. And sometimes we just have to give it a minute and acknowledge it. And, that can happen multiple times throughout a day, just depending on what's going on.
Yeah, there's a ton
but for the most part, I'm really lucky.
I mean, there's so much to unpack with you, and, we're getting close to wrapping this episode up. I want to certainly invite you to come back at some point.
Thank you.
Your story's fascinating, and I think you're sort of like this fountain of just great information and testimony. And I love that, you're pursuing all of these different things and bringing your own experiences. And the transparency part, I think, is what kind of caught me when I was watching some of your short content, like your reels and stuff like that on Instagram. I was so struck by the transparency, the vulnerability that you're willing to share with your followers and your audience. And that, to me, speaks volumes about you, and that you truly care to get these important messages out there.
Yeah.
And let's kind of end this on the Sepsis Alliance and how people can utilize that as a resource. And
absolutely.
How do they get in touch with you? How do they get in touch with this organization? What kind of pipeline are you building in that particular space?
Great, thank you. So Sepsis Alliance can be found at sepsis.org. And Sepsis Alliance is the leading sepsis advocacy and information and sepsis group in the United States. It was founded by an amazing man who lost his daughter to sepsis when she was 21 years old. And I think it's been, almost 20 years since that happened. And at the time, there just wasn't a lot of information out there about sepsis. And there's a misconception that sepsis is something that happens in the hospital. It does. People die in the hospital from sepsis. However, 80% of the cases begin in the community, like with me. So just very quickly, I would be remiss if I didn't say things to look for. We use the acronym TIME, TIME. Temperature can be high or low. It always happens with an infection, but I like to remind people you don't always know. So if you feel like you have the flu or you're getting sick, look for other symptoms. Mental decline is the M, so temperature, infection, mental decline. And that can be sounding slurred speech, confusion, being even really, really sleepy or difficult to wake up, which is what I think how it was impacting me. And then the bottom line is trust your gut. Extremely ill. If you feel like you're sicker than you've ever been or you need help, let someone know and get the help that you need. So, sorry, I hit that. You can find them at sepsis.org. There's tons of information. There's a lot of information on life after sepsis and support groups for families and survivors. And then I can be found, I'm Katy, Katy, sepsis amputee on social media. And it's Katy Grainger, how it's spelled on the podcast. And you can look me up online. And I'm just trying to share my story bit by bit. And then I'm working on my book, and it's called Finding My Footing. We're working on the subtitle right now, but Finding My Footing by Katy Grainger. And it is just about how this has turned my world around. And
That's awesome.
It's going to provide a lot of information about patient advocacy and things that you can do when you're trying to overcome something very difficult and just getting on with your life.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Katy.
Thank you.
She is, Katy Grainger. Please check her out. Check out her video content. Please follow her. She's doing some amazing things, and I'm just thrilled to see what's next. And of course, I would love to have you back on the show. And
I would love it. I'll bring my book. That's what I'm hoping.
Exactly. That was going to be my segue. And I do appreciate you, expressing some interest in the podcast, and,
absolutely,
that you've listened and followed a bit. And, it's just such an honor to have you, on our roster and be able to share your story with our, growing family community of listeners. So thanks again, Katy. My name's Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'd UP211 Podcast. And I want to wish everyone health and happiness, and we'll see you next time.